Hello! The new Commander bracket system is here, and while many Magic the Gathering players have heard our opinion on the system as a whole, as well as watched our guide to building Commander decks for Bracket 2 and Bracket 3, I still see a lot of confusion between the highest brackets of Commander gameplay. What exactly is the difference between Bracket 4 and Bracket 5? Aren't they just the same? No, they're not, but I can understand where the confusion is coming from. The three primary deck categories, brackets 2, 3, and 4, are all fairly distinct from one another, in part because each of these three brackets allow a distinct number of cards from the Game Changers list from one another. 0 for bracket 2, up to 3 for bracket 3, and unlimited for bracket 4. Bracket 4, the optimized tier, has a no-holds-barred approach to Commander. Truly, anything goes in this tier. You're free to push the 99 of your favorite commander to its very limits, with the goal of winning fast with a resilient game plan and plenty of premium interaction for your opponent's similarly fast and resilient game plan. Your deck is likely stocked with all the best fast mana, plenty of tutors, and likely one or more easy-to-assemble game-winning combos. In other words, your Bracket 4 deck is ultra-competitive and expects to play against other ultra-competitive decks. But if that's the case, then how is that different from Bracket 5? Bracket 5 is the competitive EDH tier, but just like in Bracket 4, you have access to unlimited game changers. Your deck is full of fast mana, tutors, and game-winning combos, and you're still building an ultra-competitive deck to play against other ultra-competitive decks. So what's the difference between these two brackets? With an identical card pool and many of the same cards, how can you tell if you've built an optimized Bracket 4 deck as opposed to a competitive Bracket 5 one? Well, the line might not be quite as blurry as you think, and this video is going to cover everything you need to know about building for Bracket 4 versus Bracket 5 in Commander. So let's begin with, blowing up here. Whoa, a job opening for a back-end web developer? I didn't even know the Shire was hiring. A back-end web developer. Well, actually, I've got the skills for that. No, it's true. Thanks to Boot.dev, sponsor of today's video. Boot.dev is by far the most accessible method for learning how to code. The folks who designed it know that the best way to learn Python and Go programming languages and to ensure you're never bored, which is why they've turned the process of learning coding into a captivating RPG-like game. So play a game and learn a valuable skill for the job market by getting your hands on the keyboard. You'll write a ton of code, you'll build real projects, and you'll earn XP, leveling up and completing quests. As you go, you unlock more and more pages in your spellbook, which is a reference sheet of links and notes that you can review anytime. As you get better, you'll start to climb the global leaderboard, competing against all the other students around the world who love Boot.dev. Learning to code is a great way to help you find a good job, but it isn't some get-rich-quick scheme. The curriculum takes time to complete, as it's going in-depth on both the theory behind coding and the practical applications of the concepts you're learning. That said, programmers do have amazing earning potential. According to Stack Overflow, the median salary for a back-end web developer in the US was over $100,000 in 2023. So if you're ready to learn how to code, just go to boot.dev and use my code Talarian to get 25% off your entire first year if you choose the annual plan. Thank you, boot.dev, for sponsoring this video. The metagame. The first thing to understand about building a Bracket 4 versus a Bracket 5 deck is that it's virtually impossible to build a Bracket 5 deck unintentionally. cEDH does not exist in a vacuum. It's an iterative, narrow, and self-aware format. cEDH players follow the cEDH metagame, keeping up with tournament results and tuning their decks based on the ever-evolving nature of the format. A cEDH player building a new deck is rarely doing so from scratch, but rather by heavily referencing the 99s of other players who have performed well with their chosen commander, and perhaps even net decking the entire list. Bracket 4 decks, on the other hand, do not really exist in context with a larger meta game. You might reference other players' bracket 4 decks of your chosen commander, but you're likely not also cross-referencing with the bracket 4 lists for other commanders. Even if that was something you wanted to do, it would be virtually impossible. The format is just too broad for such an exercise to be useful. And regardless, a database of the bracket 4 metagame simply doesn't exist. In fact, a bracket 4 metagame doesn't exist. But while this explanation does represent a distinction between the two brackets, the distinction might still seem arbitrary to the untrained eye. If you've built a bracket 4 deck, for instance, and you're looking at a bracket 5 deck list, you might wonder how big of a difference the existence of a metagame really made on the deck list. After all, both brackets 4 and 5 have Chrome Mox, Mox Diamond, and Mana Vault. Not to mention Demonic Tutor, Smothering Tithe, and Jessica's Will. Well over half of the 99 of a bracket 4 deck list might be identical to the 99 of a bracket 5 deck in your deck's colors. There must be more to the distinction between brackets 4 and 5 than the existence of a metagame, then. The cEDH metagame dictates the composition of a bracket 5 deck list, but since all the best cards in Commander are still the best cards regardless of whether you're building an optimized bracket 4 deck or a competitive bracket 5 deck, a metagame really only exerts an influence on the last 15 or so non-land cards in a 99. Every other deck-building consideration that a metagame requires is also required by the no-holds-barred optimization clause of bracket 4. If a metagame was all there was to distinguishing brackets 4 and 5, then there would be no reason for bracket 5 to exist as a distinct tier of commander. Bracket 4 would sufficiently encompass all of brackets 4 and 5 with a self-regulating casual approach applied to the majority of bracket 4, and an inherently distinct metagame-focused competitive approach to the upper crust of bracket 4. But the commander bracket system does draw a line between optimized casual commander and competitive commander, and to be clear, I think that's a good thing. There is a clear-cut distinction between brackets 4 and 5, and the difference is more significant to bracket 5's identity than simply having a metagame, or rather, the existence of a metagame has a wider impact on bracket 5 than just the makeup of a given deck's 99. The other two primary differences between bracket 4 and bracket 5 are as follows: the reasons for and reliance on your chosen commander, and the mindset you adopt both in deck building and in game. For the vast majority of EDH players, choosing a commander to headline your deck is the #1 most significant choice in deck building. Your commander is a symbol of personal expression. It's the only card in your deck that you're guaranteed to see every single game. But it's also likely the primary card that you built your deck around. If you play a commander game and don't cast your commander, things probably didn't go well for you in that game. It's the reason commanders with the ability Eminence left a sour taste in many players' mouths. Commanders that don't need to be cast are antithetical to the spirit of Commander. But even these Eminence commanders are still almost always important synergy pieces to their respective 99s. The Eminence ability, whether it's making additional vampires or gaining a steady stream of life, is a key consideration for choosing the 99 cards to make up the remainder of your deck. This is just as true for bracket 4 as it is for brackets 2 and 3. In bracket 5, it's often not true. In bracket 5 decks, the commander is largely a means to an end. It may be a component to your game plan, but it's often not that much more of a component than many of the cards in your 99. There are a few exceptions to this, of course. A Yuriko is indeed a ninja's deck. A Magda Brazen Outlaw deck is indeed a dwarves deck, with plenty of great artifacts to tutor for. And a Nadu deck, back when Nadu decks were legal, was indeed a point stuff at my own guys to trigger Nadu's ability over and over and over again until my opponents wither to dust. But for most cEDH decks, the commander is simply a reliable card advantage Advantage or Mana Engine. In some decks, the reasoning for the commander you choose is as simple as you wanted access to the colors in its identity. There will be some cards you include in your deck list that specifically synergize well with your commander, but that's probably going to be the minority. And while I say commander, singular, for that last point, oftentimes it's really commanders, plural. Most times, in fact, as cEDH has a disproportionate number of decks in its meta that feature partner commanders, since having 2 commanders is a lot more powerful than having just 1. I mean, you essentially start with 9 cards in your opening hand rather than 8. Partner commanders also give you access to more colors than you'd have with most playable cEDH commanders. But only the absolute strongest and cheapest synergy commanders make the cut in the cEDH metagame. For the rest, regardless of how much you push their 99s to optimize around them, and even if you were to try to metagame for blue farm and red stacks and turbo Nas, your deck will simply be outgunned on a molecular level. Well, sort of. If you were to have metagamed for cEDH using your Bracket 4 deck, you would actually just come to the conclusion that you should simply play a different deck if you hope to stand a chance. Whether or not you accept this conclusion and adjust accordingly, or simply decide to go your own way and build the deck you want with your head held high, metagame be damned, well, that mindset tells you a lot about the bracket you're actually building for. Which brings me to the next difference. A bracket is a state of mind. When you're building a Bracket 5 deck, that's because you want to play Bracket 5 games. And in order to play a Bracket 5 game, winning the game is not just the most important consideration, it's the only consideration. Politicking is a regular feature of cEDH for that reason. If every player wants to win the game, then players are incentivized to coordinate their efforts toward preventing other players from winning the game, but in a way that doesn't compromise their own ability to win. This means turn order matters a ton in Bracket 5, since the order of who receives priority when game-winning spells on the stack actually matters. If 2 players have a counterspell for the opponent's game-winning play, the one who gets priority first will have to decide whether they'll be the one to counter the spell, or if they'll risk kicking the can down the road to a player in a later turn in order to make them spend it if they don't want to lose. And while this sort of thing can certainly still happen in the lower brackets, in Bracket 5 it's an integral part of playing the game. Bracket 5's winning over everything gameplay philosophy starts well before you actually shuffle up and play a Bracket 5 game. It's front of mind in deck building too. That doesn't just mean you run all your most powerful cards. You have to consider how those cards fit together. How many removal spells do you want to run? How many counters? How much card advantage? How many combos? How many tutors? These are questions you might ask yourself in Bracket 4, but in Bracket 5, there's only one right answer for each of them, and you're trying your hardest to determine what that answer is. For many of these questions, the answer has long been known. If you're in blue, you are running all the good free counter spells. The Forces, Fierce Guardianship, Mind Break Trap, and Mental Misstep, as well as the best 1-mana counters, Swan Song, an offer you can't refuse, and Flusterstorm. There's no optionality here. In black, you are running Demonic and Vampiric Tutor by default, but you might also run Imperial Seal or Diabolic Intent as well, depending on the kind of deck you're playing. Diabolic Intent is great in a black deck with green creatures to sacrifice, while Imperial Seal is great in a more spells-based combo deck, or something like Yuriko that wants to put specific cards on top of its deck. If you're in Dimir, it's essentially mandatory to run not only Thassa's Oracle and Demonic Consultation, but you're also going to run Tainted Pact for redundancy to Consultation. If you're in Izzet, you're always going to run Underworld Breach and Brain Freeze. Outside of my example with Yuriko, all of these if-then questions are about what colors you're in, not what commander you're playing. The 99 of a Grixis commander deck with Rogrock and Silas Wren's Seeker Adept looks incredibly similar to the 99 of a 4-color Tymna Crom deck. The white cards in Tymna Crom are different, of course, and there are some Rog Rock specific cards like Culling the Weak, which don't show up in decks that don't run a 0-mana creature in the command zone. But by and large, deck building is far more rote in Bracket 5 than in Bracket 4. You'll run the best mana rocks by default in Bracket 4, yes, and if you're in blue, you'll probably have a lot of the best counterspells. But will you run Mindbreak Trap or Flusterstorm? Probably not. Yet in Bracket 5, every pod you find yourself in could easily include a Storm player. But that's much, much less likely to be true in Bracket 4. In short, Bracket 4 is about building the best version of the deck you want to make, while Bracket 5 is about building the best version of the deck you're most likely to win with. Sure, you can pick your favorite from among the short list of viable Bracket 5 decks, but that list is very, very, very short. The crux of the question is this: do you want to build a Bracket 5 deck? If you do, you'll need to put thought into doing so. You'll need to study the metagame and build your deck in accordance with that metagame. You'll choose what colors you want to play, and then you'll pick the commander that most interests you from among the best in those colors. You'll construct your 99 with the most cutthroat cards in your deck's colors, perhaps building around your commander, or perhaps just building within your colors. The cards you choose are chosen with other decks in mind, with a mindset of winning at any cost. When you play to win. Fun is secondary. If none of that sounds fun to you, don't worry. You'll only ever find yourself at a Bracket 5 commander table if you want to. Otherwise, no matter how hard you push your favorite commander to its limits, the highest bracket deck you will ever build is Bracket 4. Interested in seeing Bracket 5 in action? Check out our cEDH episode of Shuffle Up and Play with Hire from Playing with Power, Cam from Play to Win, Jim from the Spike Feeders, and of course Rebel. You can check out that video linked in this video's description or by clicking the I or whatever here. And whether you watch that episode or just our guide to how to build a Bracket 2 and 3 commander deck, I hope very much that this video and all of these videos are of some help to you. You can help me out greatly just by remembering to hit that subscribe button, slam the like button, leave a comment, ring the bell, share with a friend. You know the deal. I appreciate ya, and I hope that you shuffle up and play some games of Commander that you greatly enjoy with friends soon. And remember, you can learn valuable job skills like how to code in the Python and Go programming languages, all while playing a cool RPG game thanks to Boot.dev, sponsor of this video. You've learned what all your Magic the Gathering cards do and how they interact. You know all the Pokemon and their types and what they evolve into, but wouldn't you like to be able to know Python and Go programming languages, an actual valuable job skill? Well, Boot.dev turns learning these things into a game. So just like with Magic the Gathering and Pokemon, you can actually learn and retain the information. Imagine playing an RPG-like game and learning those skills. Well, now, thanks to Boot.dev, you can. And right now, if you use my code Tolarian, you'll get 25% off your entire first year if you choose the annual plan. Thank you, Boot.dev, for sponsoring this video.
Next time on Shuffle Up and Play.
What's up? It's Shuffle Up and Play with decks that Tomer has built for us. Tomer built the entire pod for how much money, Tomer?
$25 each, so total $100.
Do you notice how he built the decks for all of us? And he the one
I did notice that.
Did not rig it.
It looks kind of sus, Tomer.
This isn't petty prof anymore. It's proper play prof. All the P.
So much pee-pee.
So much PP.
He's showing weakness. Get him.
You've played your last shambling guest.
Because it's Commander, yeah.
Yes, correct.
That's am I going to win next turn type face.
Oh, God, no. You didn't build it that good.
He just called you a zoomer. You gonna take that?
Because of that, I'm gonna swing at prof.